what inspired the founding of Wildlife Works in 1997, right? Because I read a bit about its beginnings, and there was a story about conflicts that you saw in Kenya, right? And I think I would love to ask, what was your initial vision for solving the whole wildlife versus community conflict that you saw in Kenya? Was that kind of the reasoning for Wildlife Works beginnings?
Yeah, I mean, I had a prior career in management consulting. I had a management consulting company that did large scale change management for really big companies. Some had 300,000 employees and they had a brand new strategy that they paid millions of dollars for. And they looked out over their 300,000 employees and thought, gee, I know somebody has to do something different on Monday morning, but I really don't know who or what. And so they would hire us to come in and help them figure out like who and what has to do something different if they're actually going to pursue their new multi-million dollar strategy. So that was my professional life prior to I had been the company that I co-founded with a bunch of people had been acquired by a public company, and I was on the executive team of that public company. But I'd always promised myself I had a bit of time and money, I'd go to Africa because I've been an elephant aficionado for my entire as long as I can remember since I was a little kid reading Babar. And so I collected elephant figurines and this that, but I lived in England and the US and there are no elephants in either place. So I went to Kenya and I was there with my wife just on a trip in 1995 actually. Um, and I couldn't help but notice that this beautiful place that I was in, which was absolutely stunning and full of beautiful wildlife, and but it had these weird things like electric fences and guys with guns walking around. And I started doing my consulting thing of asking stupid questions, and the answers I got were a little bit surprising to me that the fences and the guns weren't for the animals, they were for people. And when I said, what people? And they said, well, exactly. If we didn't have the fences and guns, you'd be seeing a lot of people here. And so that got me interested. I was like, oh, interesting. What kind of people? And so so I asked them to take me out of the private retreat that I was on and into go see these people. And they drove me out into out of the boundary of this place, which was fenced. And we drove for about 15 minutes and then we stopped in a village or town, actually. And we got out, and then I thought it was maybe a water break or something. And then I said, what are we doing here? And they said, there they are. And they waved their hand. These guys that were managing this piece of private land, they waved their arm at 5,000 people. So there they are. And I had this sort of aha moment where the threat that they were so worried about, that was basically the people that live there and belong there. And so that got me thinking about why they were so threatening, and what this project was doing, or this conservancy was doing to be welcome in this landscape that where they had so many neighbors that seemed to resent them being there. So I got very curious about human wildlife conflict. It was a very unstudied topic in those days, and it was very hard to find anything about it, but I was able to find a little bit that got me on this path that, look, if we if we need wildlife, or if we want wildlife, and I'm in both categories, I believe we need it, and I desperately want it to persist into the future, then we need to find economic solutions for these communities that share their landscape with the wildlife that they want, not ones that we tell them they need, but ones that they see as valuable. So the idea behind Wildlife Works is I believed then, and I still believe, that wildlife is an asset and the natural world is an asset, but it's not always easy to value that asset. And certainly for these communities that have been sometimes stripped of natural resources by colonials, et cetera, it's a challenge for them to benefit from their environment and not be in conflict with it. So the idea behind Wildlife Works is we need to find new models for these communities that are going to drive economic value to them that is based on the presence of wildlife and wilderness. And if we can't do that, then we're going to lose the wildlife. And that's what's happened in the rest of the world, where development was at odds with wildlife. So that was the onus. I literally came up with the name Wildlife Works on that trip. I spent about a year thinking about it and what we would do. I spent about the next 10 years paying to try and figure out how to make it work. And then eventually along came the carbon market and became a model that was very obviously appropriate for the kind of challenge that I saw in my travels. So that's the Wildlife Work started in 1997 with the concept of how do we bring market, it has to be the market because it's the only place that has enough money and it's currently engaged in trashing the planet. And if we can't figure out how to redirect that funding to support the planet, then we're never going to have enough philanthropy to fix it. So part of it was, we need to engage the market in a positive way and have them be part of the solution, not the problem that we're trying to solve, because these solutions need to be economic for these communities. They need real economic growth potential. And then the second part of it was just there's plenty of people doing great work in the conservation space, and not nearly enough philanthropy to fund them all. So I didn't want to be another one of those people, looking for money in a very crowded space. So and the third thing is I just didn't know anything about being a nonprofit, having been a for-profit my entire career. So all those reasons I started Wildlife Works as a for-profit. We were extremely unprofitable for-profit for a good period of time, so we might as well have been nonprofit, to be honest. But because starting a business with a concept turns out not to be the fastest way to revenue.